Thanks everyone for being here today, and thanks for the invitation to talk about, yes, this transition that we have gone through from the spectrums made by Respironics. You might be familiar that they've essentially are no longer being supported and soon no longer sold. To the Fitbit, specifically the Fitbit Charge 5 is the device that we've been using, although my understanding is we will now all be moving to Fitbit Charge 6s. But the plan for today, it's pretty informal. Obviously, please jump in with any questions. Our lab manager, Mooney, is going to start by doing an overview of sort of how we initialize the Fitbit, the instructions we give to participants, things to think about in terms of interacting with the participants. And then the plan is I will step in and talk a little bit more about using Fitabase and how we download and analyze the data and different things to think about with that. So hopefully we won't really be talking for more than about 30, 40 minutes at the most, with the idea that we'll have a good period of time at the end for questions. Before I turn things over to Mooney, I do want to thank very much Kathy Goldstein, who has just been a wonderful resource for us as we started to navigate this new device. And I'd also throw out the caveat that we do not yet consider ourselves experts with Fitbit or Fitabase at all. We have done extensive in-lab testing, and we have helped a group run one participant with the Fitbit and analyze their data. But I think we do have a clinical trial starting now, and my hope would be after running 10, the first 10 or 15 people will start to really feel a bit more expert with all of it. And we do have written instructions for all of these steps if people are interested. Today, I think we're just going to try and touch on kind of the broad strokes of things. And so I think with that, I will hand it over to Mooney.
All righty, thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Mooney. I'm the lab manager here at the Sleep and Circadian Research Lab, and I help test wearables like these for our studies. I am going to be covering mainly the initialization of Fitbits for participants. So initialization is like preparing the device for the participant. And then I am going to go over a little bit about the information that we share with participants. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So a few notes with regards to the Fitbit initialization. We do use Fitabase to download the data from Fitbits. Google does not allow you access to the raw data within a Fitbit. So with Fitabase, when you use it, even though it's de-identified, a lot of the information that you do download from Fitabase gets downloaded directly to your computer. So we do recommend that you only use core image computers for initialization or for the download process. Also important to note is IA approved these devices, Fitbit and Fitabase, for use on core image devices. So just using core image devices kind of, make sure we cover that base. Another thing to note is when study groups access Fitabase, or when you access Fitabase, Fitabase is kind of pricey. So sometimes a lot of study groups will share it, which means there's data from different studies on there. So make sure to click the correct code name on Fitabase when you're looking at data, because you might end up looking at a subject whose data you're not approved to look at. Lastly, when you get a brand new Fitbit delivered to you, make sure to open it and pair it to a phone for the first time. You should not, we recommend you not having the mindset of, okay, here's a brand new device, we'll open it when the participant's here, give it to them and we'll be good to go, because usually the device has to download a firmware update, which adds about 15 to 20 minutes on top. That could end up delaying your whole process. So make sure to turn it on, pair it to a phone, and then allow it to download that firmware update. Okay. In prepping the Fitbit for participants, first you'll have to identify what your Fitbit is or which Fitbit you're giving to your participant, just to keep track of if there's any inter-device variability. We do that by identifying the serial number, which is kind of hidden away in one of the slots for, I don't have a picture of it, but it's in one of the slots where the wristbands plug in. It is really tiny, and what we end up doing is we take a picture of the serial number and zoom in with the phone's digital zoom to better see it. Prior to giving the Fitbit to participants, we do charge it for a couple hours. This should get its battery to 100%. When you plug the Fitbit in, so it comes with a magnetic charging cable. When you plug the Fitbit in to the outlet and then the Fitbit itself to that cable, just make sure you see the little Thunderbolt charging symbol, because sometimes it'll magnetically stick to the adapter, but it's not real. The pins aren't lined up and it won't be charging. In terms of cleaning, Fitbit has recommended we just use alcohol wipes and just wipe the device down. And items we provide to the participant are charging cord, charging block, a couple of alcohol wipes, and we just put all of that in a Ziploc bag for them. Okay. During the visit, the first thing we do with participants is we confirm verbally that they do not have any medically implanted devices, such as a pacemaker or a defibrillator. If they do use an implanted medical device, they will have to be dropped from the study because Fitbit claims there is a potential for it to interact, for the Fitbit device to interact with that. We then ask the participant to download the Fitbit app to their phone and log in or create an account. On the App Store, the app is titled Fitbit Health and Fitness. They can just search for the word Fitbit. But the important thing to note is once they download the app, when they sign in, since Google purchased Fitbit, they will need to sign in using a Gmail account. If they have a pre-existing Google account, they can just use that. Or if not, we usually just walk them through how to create a Google account right at the start of the study. And then at the end of the study, if they don't want to keep that account, we will walk them through how to delete the Google account. Once that is done and they're logged in, we will pair the Fitbit to the device, and the instructions we're more than happy to provide you with kind of run through all of that. But there are some permissions and that we kind of keep an eye on to make sure that we want the device to be as least bothersome to the participant as possible. So we allow the device to pair via Bluetooth. We allow the app to send push notifications. So that is to the phone. But we block the Fitbit from receiving any phone notifications, any access to contacts or call history. So we don't want the Fitbit buzzing when they receive a phone call or something like that. We block the irregular heart notifications sort of warning message. We do not give the Fitbit access to location or GPS. And then let's see. The only notifications we allow are the low battery notifications, and we allow these both as push notifications and email notifications. Basically, if the Fitbit drops below 25%, they get a little message saying they need to charge their device. We do let participants know that the Fitbit is water resistant, but should not be exposed to water for extended periods of time. And we advise them to remove the Fitbit when showering, taking a bath, swimming, etc., and not to charge it if it's wet. But because they are taking the device off when they shower or take a bath, it's very important that they remember to put it back on, and we emphasize that to them. On the Fitbit itself, on the Fitbit app, we also have them turn off a few things. We turn off the coaching tab. We turn off the sleep tile and health metrics. We don't want the app giving them any kind of feedback that would change their behavior. All right. So we already talked about the email notifications. Everything else is turned off for email notifications. And we do set a consistent watch face, which is the default watch face, and it looks just like this. And these are settings on the app, on the device itself. We make sure that sleep mode is on. So this is the device turns off the screen after a little bit of idle time with no movement. And then we make sure there are no alarms set on the Fitbit. We tell the participant not to set up any alarms as well, because we don't want anything waking up during the night. All right. All right. Then we connect the device itself to Fitabase, which again, we're happy to provide you with instructions. And one other thing we do keep track of before I go into the instructions for the participants is the app version. We ask the participants to open their app either through settings or on Android. It's a long press, and we note down the app version at every visit. All right. Now, just real quick, let me share some Fitbit instructions for participants. I'll try to fly through this. All right. So for participants, we tell them they should wear it on their non-dominant wrist. Should be only taken off while charging or when they shower. We want to make sure it's in contact with their skin so that it can pick up heart rate. We ask them not to alter any of the settings and that we've set it up so that it's not bothering them. We just want this to be a passive data collection device. We remind them not to set up any alarms. There is a chance that people will experience some kind of skin irritation, so we ask them to make sure that the device is dry before, or their skin is dry before they put the device back on after a shower or anything like that. We do let them to know that they should contact us if it stops collecting data, syncing, or if they lose it. In terms of the charge schedule, they charge it about twice a week, and we do text them on days that it needs to be charged. And it's usually well before the 25% threshold, but we do inform them that if it does drop below 25%, they will receive a notification. They should charge it immediately. With regards to charging, we tell them to charge in the middle of the day, and that they're not charging too close to bedtime, because then what they'll end up doing is plugging it in and delaying their bedtime, waiting for the device to get fully charged. So we want to avoid that completely. And lastly, for the data to appear on Fitabase, we ask participants to open the Fitbit app and swipe down on the home screen of the app, which will send the data to Fitabase. One other document I have here, which is going to be just a couple of lines that we'll review.
Mooney, sorry to interrupt. Do you want to screen share these documents? That might help.
Oh, is it not screen sharing them?
No, I think it's showing the end of your
Oh, I'm so sorry.
PowerPoint. That's all right.
We also have a couple questions in the chat.
Okay, I will should I look at the questions now, or?
Now, I think if you want to just quickly screen share the instructions to participant sheet, and then I think also the daily checklist, and then I think that would be a great place to stop for questions.
All right. Let me see. Okay, so here are the instructions for participants. Sorry about that, everyone. Again, the warning about wearing it on their non-dominant wrist, not setting any alarms, the skin irritation note, just information that we provide them. We do ask them not to allow anyone else, like family members, friends, to use the Fitbit. It should just be on the participant's arm for the entire length of the study, except taken off when they shower or bathe. Instructions on their charging schedule. They can check the battery life. So that's the one interaction we ask them to make with the Fitbit, is just swiping up or double tapping on the face of the Fitbit to be able to see the battery life. Lastly, the most important notification I would probably tell them is to open the Fitbit app on their phone every day, just so we can make sure that there's no problems on our end when we look at Fitabase. Okay, and then the final document with just a couple of lines. Is the Fitbit daily checklist. And this is just a daily checklist for the participant to follow, but it does have a couple of steps. Right before they go to bed at night, we want to make sure that they have the Fitbit on their wrist, because it's very important for us to collect that sleep data. And then when they wake up in the morning, opening the Fitbit app and swiping down on the app's home screen. All right, with that, that ends my little initialization section. Sorry about the screen sharing, but I'll hand it over to Helen.
I guess maybe this is a good place to address some questions. If people want to bring up questions, they put in the chat. I think it's hard to monitor the chat and also present, so.
Yeah, so I had a quick question there. So when you initialize the device to get updates, do you have to like pair it to your own account and then unpair it and give it to the participant?
What we do is as soon as we receive a device, when it's mailed, when it's delivered, say by like Amazon or something, we do pair it to our own account, let the firmware download, and then unpair. And I think once that initial pair is done, there's no other firmware download. And so then we can pair it to the participant's account. And it doesn't have to necessarily happen right there with the participant. We usually do it months in advance as soon as we receive a new device, so it's ready to go for the participant.
Now, I think someone in the chat was asking about why they shouldn't wear it in the shower, because a lot of people wear them when they go swimming.
Yeah, I think when we reviewed all the guidelines from Fitbit, it basically was saying that it was not waterproof. And there is a particular setting that I think users can employ. It's recommended, Fitbit was recommending this setting be activated before and then deactivated after each shower. And we just decided that that was going to be too involved. So we simply just asked people to take it off and then put it back on after they shower. Any other questions?
I think
that
someone, I was going to
sorry.
say, I think someone had asked kind of about just sharing like the data. And so
Yeah,
maybe it might be
so
helpful if you address it. Yeah.
yeah, so as Mooney mentioned, Fitabase is expensive. And so our lab ended up purchasing, I guess, the subscription to it, which I think, I'm trying to remember, I think it's about $2,500 a year. And then we had collaborators reach out and say, we can't afford the full subscription. Can we kind of piggyback, like pay our way towards a subscription? And so we've come up with various agreements that way. But these are all people, obviously, I think actually all of them, they're all definitely at University of Michigan. Some are in psychiatry, some are in anesthesiology, but these are all groups that we currently collaborate with. So from that point of view, it's not PHI that we see. I also understand that we want to respect that, we shouldn't necessarily be looking through data that someone else has collected, that we're not playing an integral role. We should only look if we need to, right, for the purposes of research. So yeah, so that's the current setup. Any other questions?
Yeah, I would add, I mean, unless you intentionally click and download the file and then open the file, you're not really looking at their data. Or click on the code name that you know is not someone in your study. So just being cognizant of clicking on participants that you're approved to look at is a good first step.
Yep. Okay.
Someone's also asking, are there less expensive alternatives than Fitabase?
I think that's a good question. Kathy probably knows more than we do. I think it looks like Sarah has an answer. We went with Fitabase because it seemed to be the program that most people in the sleep field were using. But Sarah, feel free.
Yeah, so for those of you who use My Data Helps, there is a way that you can use My Data Helps as well. Getting the aggregate level data is free if you want the minute-to-minute data. There's a new cost structure. I can't remember exactly what it is. But Depression Center has those, or Nicole Eyring has those numbers. So you can pay extra on your My Data Helps account to get the minute-to-minute data. We didn't go with that choice just because we didn't really know what the data looked like and how easy or difficult it was, whereas Fitabase was very clearly easy, established, whatnot. But those are the only two to my knowledge where you can get the raw minute-to-minute data from Fitbit. That is at least IA approved by University of Michigan, but I could be wrong. That's what I was told.
Okay, cool. So I'll move. Is it okay? Sorry, Danielle, did you have another question?
Yeah, someone just was also asking, so if you're kind of collaborating on each other's studies, would everyone need to be on each other's IRB roster? That was the question.
I don't know if every single person is, I think for our folks that are accessing Fitabase, I think, and that's mostly, I believe, Mooney and myself at this point, we are on the other collaborators' IRBs. But I think Kathy put in an analogy there that, yeah, you basically don't look at data that you don't need to. You're only looking at data that you need to look at for the purposes of research. So. Okay, so moving forward, I think I put in the chat that Kathy has just published an amazing review on all of these wearables, state of the science and recommendations for using wearable technology in sleep and circadian research. I shudder to think how long it took to prepare this because it's really comprehensive, but I would highly recommend it. I think it's great. And actually, this sentence I'll read out because I think it really just highlights our experience, which is, we would like to also warn the readers that despite the apparent simplicity, appropriate use of consumer-grade sleep tracking devices for research and clinical purposes is quite challenging and holds hidden complexity. So absolutely, that has been our experience for sure. Okay, so I will start us off in Fitabase. And oops, sorry guys, it looks like it's kicked me out. So let me go back in. I actually didn't realize that it kicked you out, but okay, so I'm going to show you some sample data from a subject who has obviously finished her participation. I will pull her up. So let me screen share. Okay, all right. And let me pull down here. Okay, now my computer has frozen in its display. Okay. Actually, we will take a look at sleep. And with Fitabase, you have to put in the dates of participation. So I will put those in first of all here, which was November 21st to December 6th. And this was a 2-week period. There's different ways to look at the data, and the approach that we like, the best kind of visualization of the data, is this minute by minute display. And it's collecting 1-minute epochs. If I scroll through here, you can hopefully see time ticking up by a minute. and it's showing every sleep period, and it will only show a sleep period if it's longer than an hour. So any nighttime sleep episodes, naps greater than an hour, it will show here. And the different types, dark blue is asleep, the light blue is restless, which when we look at the output of coding, which I'll show you later, it appears sometimes is considered sleep. But then the red is wakefulness, that's awake during the sleep episode. And it took me a while to appreciate this. While over here, you can see the start and end. So this is a nap that's showing up here. And then nighttime sleep episodes. The entire episode is stretched across this same width on the display. So that's just helpful if I scroll down here. So for example, here, oops, sorry, I think Zoom is really slowing down my view here. Yeah, so here, for example, you can see the epochs, again, still 1 minute epochs, but they're a lot wider. And that just very quickly, you can be like, okay, well, that's probably a nap. You can see it straight away because of the display. Now, we use with Fitbit, there is, let's see if I can find it, all the way, again, moving with all these multiple Zoom screens. All the way down the bottom here, you have the option of exporting. And stages is the sleep that is detected with activity and heart rate. And that is the one that we use. But you can also export so-called classic, which is just activity. And one of the reasons why we transitioned to the Fitbit is because the Spectrum was activity only. So we do feel that the sleep-wake detection is going to be better with the addition of heart rate. So we go with the sleep stages. Things get a little tricky with naps. If the nap is shorter than 3 hours, you will only be able to look at the classic output. You will not be able to extract that heart rate plus activity sleep stages. So far, thankfully, we don't really deal with naps. We need to know when they occur in terms of making sure people are following our protocols, but we don't actually analyze the content of naps at this stage. But if we were, that's potentially a little problematic because now you're looking at short naps analyzed in a different way from the main nighttime sleep episode. So that's just a little trickiness to kind of keep in mind. Now, if we take a look at heart rate, we will see heart rate across the entire 2 weeks that this participant wore the device. And if you eyeball carefully, you can see a few little gaps here, but essentially what we do now is, heart rate does not show when they take the Fitbit off. So heart rate is a way of checking whether they have the Fitbit on. And the Spectrum device, we know for certain it wasn't perfect, but it did have an off-wrist detection. So this is a way of kind of working out on or off wrist is through heart rate. But we do, okay, my screen is again struggling. Sorry. Let me go down here and just try to come back in. I'll go back into sleep and then try and come back into heart rate. If we go back in, here we go. Okay, so what we've determined is we need to look at heart rate on a day-by-day basis so we can zoom in enough to take a look. And so I'll show you just apparently a good day. So this is the 22nd to the 23rd. Kind of what you see on a good day. And you can see heart rate. This is around the time they're falling asleep, heart rate comes down and then they're wearing it for the rest of the day. So that's all looking pretty good. But potentially a bad day, particularly when one is looking at sleep, would be this. And so here, this subject took the Fitbit off at 11:30. She then went to sleep. She woke up a couple hours later and put it back on. And unfortunately, that means that we do not consider the sleep extracted during this period as accurate because we're missing part of the sleep. It's a 2-hour period of sleep here that we're missing. So that's something to keep in mind. I do think that you will have to scan heart rate on a day-by-day basis for any night that you're considering getting sleep from in order to feel confident that you are fully capturing the sleep. Okay, so I am going to quit out of Fitabase and just very quickly show you a couple other files that we've created that just we have found helpful. This one we call the comparison sheet, and what we're trying to do is pull all of the sleep information that we have from different sources into the one template so that we can start to really get a feel for the sleep data. So I will, okay, screen share this one. Okay, hopefully people can see this. So don't worry too much about the colors at this point. But yeah, this is just a pretty simple Excel spreadsheet we created. And I'll show you this in another file, but essentially we do extract the time at which Fitbit says the person fell asleep, and then we extract their final awakening. We don't have it for this subject, but for our procedures, the Spectrum had an event marker press, which was a great way to for the subject to press that button when they were just about to turn off the light and try and fall asleep, and then also when they were finally awake in the morning. The Fitbit doesn't have that, so we do have a system where they can actually text an email address, and that is all recorded and timestamped. So we can access that data later, and so we can essentially look for the equivalent of an event marker press. It's just not showing for this particular individual. And then we have information that we extract from the sleep log, the time that they started trying to fall asleep, and then again, their final wake time. So to start us off, I guess, and one thing that I think is really relevant is we can access the Fitbit data remotely, so we can download it and process it as much as possible before the participant arrives. But then we have the possibility with them sitting in front of us or on a Zoom call in which we can start to ask some questions about any oddities that we see in the sleep data. This is what we did with the Spectrum. It's what we're doing with the Fitbit. And it really helps when you come to analyzing the data to have had that opportunity to ask the participants some questions. Okay, so we'll start off with what I guess could be a good night, as in everything aligns. And that is, you can see this first night, the subject says that they started trying to fall asleep at 1:30. And the Fitabase says they actually fell asleep at about 20 minutes later. And this is a participant who has a chronic pain condition, and this seemed pretty reasonable. Looking at all the data, checking the heart rate, going through all of that, yes, this seemed pretty reasonable. Person then reports waking up, finally being awake for the day at 5:18, and Fitabase says they woke up at 5:15. This is all looking pretty good. Makes sense. Then we can see a pattern here where now the subject is reporting trying to fall asleep at 11:20 at night, but we see Fitabase reports that they fell asleep at 10:08. In some cases that we've seen this, we have determined that the participant essentially watched a movie or TV at 10 o'clock and then got up and went to bed, and Fitbit incorrectly decided that this was sleep. But in this particular circumstance with this subject, there is a space on our log for people to talk about falling asleep a bit earlier. And she reported this as sort of a nap. She did actually fall asleep before 10 o'clock, and then she got up briefly. She wrote 11:20 on her sleep diary as her nighttime, trying to fall asleep at night, but she had in fact fallen asleep earlier. So in this case, Fitbit/Fitabase was correct. So we did not actually have to go and correct any of these. These all fit in. Okay, then we come down to this situation, which was subject reporting falling asleep at 11:30, Fitabase or Fitbit saying they fell asleep at 1:30. You've got that 2-hour difference. This is that example I showed you in which we checked the heart rate and we could see that actually the Fitbit was off. So this person did not take 2 hours to fall asleep. We're just missing some of the sleep episode. And then I guess the last case, we haven't seen a lot of this in our testing, but certainly it seems possible that someone could report, for example, waking up at 6 and then they stay in bed and they're scrolling on their phone for half an hour or an hour. That is something that we would also double check. Look at the time that Fitbit is reporting they woke up, cross-checking that against the sleep diary, and then asking the subject if there's anything unusual that happened that morning. So yeah, this is where we collate all the data and start to get a sense of what's happening. So a couple more Excel files to show you quickly, and then I'll be done. Let me see. So the file in which we extract the sleep data and kind of make sense of it all, unfortunately, Fitabase will export the sleep epochs, minute by minute epochs. They will do that where every single night just runs into another night. It's not separate files or any, there's no line indicating. You just notice that the time suddenly switches. So there'll be continuous 1-minute epochs until you'll hit, for example, 6 a.m. when the person wakes up. And then the next row right after that will be like 11:30 p.m. And you suddenly realize, and you see the date change, and you suddenly realize, oh, that's the start of the next episode. So anyway, I'll show you this example here. So yeah, this is what the output looks like. You can see the date and the time. It spits out different metrics: level, short wake, sleep stage. We have been in contact with Fitabase, and we do have a coding that basically codes all of that either into sleep or wake. That's all we need to know for our analyses. So night 1, Fitabase essentially says this person fell asleep at 1:51. So the output, you can see here that the output just starts with what apparently is a nap, and we're not analyzing the nap, but it started around 5 on the 22nd. And if we scroll down, you'll notice the time. Yep, here we go. This is what I was talking about before. So this is the end of that nap, and then all of a sudden, next epoch is very close to the start of the next episode. So the data just all runs in together, and you have to kind of go in and make sense of it. So here we are on the 23rd. For whatever reason, this can vary how much time of wake you get before the sleep starts. We've got 2 epochs of wake here, and then sleep has started at 1:51. So that is what is going in here. And we just convert that to decimal time. And then it's ending at 5:15. So we can scroll down here. And again, you can see with the output, it's continuing for a while until it jumps to the next sleep episode. But we are taking the last epoch of sleep here, and that is at 5:15. So again, that is converted into decimal time. Then we just look at the total time from when they fell asleep to when they woke up, which is the difference between those two. Total sleep time is the number of epochs within that band that's actually sleep. And so then we generate sleep percentage, which is the number of epochs of sleep over the total epochs. And then the number of epochs of wake is wake after sleep onset. And so that is how we extract those sleep variables ourselves from the raw data. And then the last file I will show you is just kind of the summary file that we create at the very end. And it is loading up. And here we go. This is where we just kind of try and bring everything together. So this is the nights I was showing you for this participant. Here are the ones with the Fitbit was off. But this is set up very much to look like the spectrum output. It's kind of what we're used to looking at. So you can see the start date and time of the sleep episode, and then those sleep metrics we calculated. And just mentioning that you can extract these heart rate variability metrics from the Fitbit. I think this varies according to which Fitbit you use, but for Charge 5, and I think 6 as well, you can do this. You get time domain measures, the root mean squared successive difference, but you can also get the frequency domain measures. And these are exported in 5-minute epochs. And I believe that's because you need at least 5 minutes of data to calculate a lot of these metrics in terms of just having a stable signal. And Kathy mentions in her paper that out of these metrics, the root mean squared successive difference is probably the one that you would want to use because I think it has less assumptions associated with it. The spectral analysis methods, I think there's a lot of stationary data assumptions and everything that go into that. So the root mean squared successive difference is probably the best one. I'm not sure, honestly, we're going to extract this for every sleep study. It's also pretty involved to pull all of these out into a summary variable, but possible. Fitbit says it will only export heart rate variability during the sleep episode because heart rate has to be stable. But we have noticed in the exports that sometimes there's 5-minute averages that come out which are outside of the sleep episode, and we've just decided not to use those when we calculate our averages. But I will stop there and answer any questions. I was not able to keep track of the chat, so if people want to run some of those past me.
There was a lot going on in the chat. So let me try and well, so there was a conversation between Kathy and Sarah about
Sarah has her hand up too.
Yeah, Sarah's my data help experience. So while I read through the chat, Sarah, why don't you share your comments about that?
Oh, sure. I can share my comments, and then I was actually one of the questions too, so I'll ask it. So just so Kathy's question is whether in my study we're doing sleep diaries as well to get self-report onset and offset of sleep. To which I answered yes, we do the consensus sleep diary via My Data Helps. And then what I programmed in after that is those sheets that Mooney showed you about reminders. So they do their consensus sleep diary. They get a screen that says, hey, remember to sync your Fitbit, and then just some reminders about their Fitbit. So we kind of put it all into one questionnaire for the morning. But what my question is, you know, as you're going through those sheets, Helen, it seems like you take participants self-reported, you know, onset and offset via the sleep diary as like gold standard. So if actigraphy doesn't match that, it seems like you're more in doubt of the actigraphy than the self-report. But in bipolar disorder, there's a considerable literature that suggests that individuals have a significant bias in their report of their sleep onset and offset, tending to report their onset later and offset later, I think it is. And so when I've gone into actigraphy data in my bipolar samples, I often, unless I have reason to believe that the heart rate, you know, like it's off, take actigraphy at face value. So I was just curious about your perspective on that, and whether other people have thoughts of like, you know, is it always the gold standard to view the self-report as accurate versus the actigraphy?
Yeah, so I would not say that we take their self-report as the gold standard. In our clinical trials, we sometimes have people following, we give them recommended sleep schedules to follow. And so we are checking to see, so we see them once a week to give them feedback on how they're doing and try and encourage them through the process. These are kind of many weeks long protocols. But we are definitely interested in what they have to say, and we do use that to try and work out just exactly what happened. And this is not new to Fitbit, right? We had the same thing happening with Spectrum, where sometimes it really looked like they fell asleep early or they stayed up late. And what they were telling us happened didn't quite match the data. In that case, we typically go with the data. But we do flag it to the participant, and we found the easiest way to do this in kind of a non-confrontational way is just to say, well, we have seen some oddities that, you know, between this and this, and hopefully we just won't see it again. And we find a lot of the time that resolves it, and they know we can see certain things. And then we start noticing that they're doing better on the diary, and everything tends to gel a little bit more.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Kathy, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I have like a big thing with this. So the sleep diary, we're not looking for their sleep onset and offset from the diary as the gold standard. We're looking at the diary for the, you know, subjective report of intent to sleep. Because the problem is the devices, like when you look at the data that are comparing Fitbit, Apple Watch, whatever, or to PSG, they are excellent. Like it is a far cry from actigraphy. These devices can classify sleep from wake better than actigraphy. They're pretty good. They are very good at detecting sleep. They often classify non-moving wakefulness, however, as sleep. So they do great in the sleep lab, but the problem is that human beings like flank their sleep period with non-moving restfulness. And I have a big concern that if we don't account for that by using this is the time I got in bed and tried to sleep, that there's going to be a lot of studies that show long sleep is associated with this, long sleep's associated with that, when it's really lying around, you know, on a screen or watching TV. And so I actually, you know, I know it needs to be operationalized in a way that's scalable, but I do think that subjective report of I got in bed and was intending to sleep is important to really like harness the power of the sleep wake classifiers that are being used by the device. Otherwise, I think there's the possibility for a lot of spurious data that's reflecting other things and it's being attributed to sleep.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And we are as I said at the beginning, we're in the very early stages of this. And I read that quote from Kathy's recent review, that this really turned into a lot more of an intensive process than we were expecting. My hope is moving forward as we start to become more familiar with all the steps in Fitabase and analyzing the data, that things move a little bit more quickly. But I don't think we've saved as much time compared to the spectrum analysis as we thought. The spectrum analysis was still involved. Again, we had to look at the sleep diary, we had to set rest intervals, we had to export the rest intervals. So that was also time intensive. But I think moving forward, after we've run hopefully another 10 or 20 participants, we get more familiar, I would hope that we would come up with some ways to speed this up through some sort of automation. And we have funds to support that if anyone wants to reach out to help us with this down the
Funny you
road.
mentioned that because I already set up a meeting with Moni tomorrow.
Great, because yeah, I think I mean, for us early on, we need to roll up our sleeves and kind of dig into the data and work out step by step. But from my point of view, if we think we can automate it, great, and we could always have a situation where we automate the output for X number of subjects, and then we come in and say, okay, well, let's, depending on the number of subjects, let's randomly choose 5% or 20% or whatever it might be, and go in and manually do those just to double check, like, okay, we feel that the automatic analysis is working. But Kathy, I was going to ask you, are you aware of, I think all I've heard about is algorithms that analyze the raw signal, but nothing that is also comparing using inputs derived from the sleep diaries, for example, and things like that. But curious, Kathy, if you're aware of kind of where others are up to and trying to
Yeah.
automate some of this.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like particularly how Sarah was doing it through My Data Helps, that if you have everything digital, that it shouldn't be a problem to clean it in that way, right? Because then you're just coming up with those aggregate measures like total sleep time, sleep efficiency, like is gated within like a start and stop time. I'm gonna look and see. There's some people that may have code for this. When they're cleaning their data, I'm gonna go look at their GitHub pages. And then for people that truly don't want to use this feasible if it's planned from the get-go. And I'm sorry I'm not on camera. I'm driving a sick kid to the doctor. Sorry, everybody.
You cut out a little bit, Kathy, but did that make sense, Helen? Did you get enough?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Yeah, Helen, I
So-
have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
That was excellent. Thank you. So, we've been talking about, some of the studies for a bit more of a longer term use, right? With the Fitbit, months, and how much data cleaning would that involve? Because seeing all this data makes me think, wow, that's going to be a lot of work if you're going to, use a Fitbit in somebody for several months on end. So how much, effort wise, could be a lot, right?
It could be, and I think that's why, yeah, we're coming up with some automated cleaning, which then we can, like I said, just randomly choose a certain percentage to go in and hand edit and just feel confident that the automatic analysis is working. But yeah, this is, we're in the early stages of a Fitbit adventure, and this is where we are now. And I hope that, yeah, we can speed things up a little bit. But as I said, with the Spectrum, it was an involved process. We would set rest intervals. One person would set rest intervals, then another person would take a look at it to get a second set of eyes to make sure the rest intervals appeared correct. Then we would export. We still had to manipulate those export files to some extent. So there was definitely a process as well with the Spectrum.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I mean, I think the big improvement here is, as Kathy described, we can feel more confident in the sleep-wake detection with activity and heart rate. That was the main reason why there's other actigraphy devices out there that were being promoted around the time, when it came out that the Spectrum was no longer going to be supported and then later sold. We decided to go with a Fitbit because, first of all, we knew that there were folks here at UM that were using it. But also that the detection of sleep wake would be improved above and beyond just actigraphy. And the possibility that you could also calculate those heart rate variability metrics as well.
Yeah.
It's attractive. Oh, and I guess the last thing that was also attractive to us was the possibility that we can remotely download the data. We hope in a few months to be launching our first ever large clinical trial that's fully remote. And so being able to remotely download people's sleep data as part of that was really key. And that's not something that we would be able to do with the Spectrum.
Yeah.
There was a question about whether or not you have screenshots of the participants' Fitbit app after all of the unnecessary, like after the settings have been set.
I don't think we do. We just have our written instructions that guide the research staff member through all of the different things that should be looked at and checked. But I don't think we have screenshots of that.
Okay. There's so much conversation. This is great. Okay, I'm going to open it up to general questions from everyone because it seems like a lot of the questions were answered already in the chat. So we have just 1 minute left technically. So I'll open it up and let you all ask questions. None. Well, this was absolutely fantastic, and I really appreciate that you shared like the specifics that you share with participants. We get a lot of questions about like what does the information for participant setup and all of that look like. So sharing that was really, really helpful. And I'm sure we'll be reaching out to you with more questions and as we go. So thank you so much, and go Blue. Some of us are going to be watching football tonight, so I'll throw that in there.
Well, thanks for inviting us, and I hope down the road we have a bit more hands-on experience and we can maybe share a bit more in months to come.
Thank you.
you so
Thank you
much.
to both of you. Thanks for everyone for joining.